All right.
Hi, Chase. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Chase, as Nathan just introduced. I am Nathan's brother-in-law. I am married to his sister. Um, I have worked in IT for the last 15, 16 years, lived in Houston the last 15, 16 years, and have two boys, 7 and 12. And that's me.
Uh, who both I had an opportunity to interview. Isaac was really wanting to know when he would get to go to the moon. That was his his big thing.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be there as long as Kalachi's around the moon. He'll be fine.
So did you know that NASA's planning to send astronauts to the moon? I guess that's kind of a silly question considering.
Yes, I am aware that they are doing that. I believe I've heard you tell me or other people that for the last couple of years, so that I am aware of that. Yes.
What do you think about it?
I think that's interesting. Um, what is the main objective once we go there in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole list of objectives in terms of finding out if the water ice, and the poles of the moon is really there. Research about kind of understanding more about the Earth Moon space that we're going through. I mean, meteors are constantly hitting the Earth, but most of them burn up in the atmosphere. The ones that don't burn up in the atmosphere, most of them land in the ocean, and the ones that hit the land, they get weathered over, and a vegetation grows over them. But a proportion of those same meteors have been hitting the moon, but the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, doesn't have weather. So it's like a library of the history of impacts of the Earth. So there's science there to understand, and then some people are hoping that we go further. And if we do go further, then the moon is the closest place to start out. So that's sort of. But I think it all comes down to, what do you see as the future of humanity? Do you think we're going to be forever stuck on the Earth, or do you think at some point humans will expand beyond the Earth?
Well, if we are to survive, I imagine we'll eventually have to leave. There's only a finite amount of resources that we have, and as quickly as we seem to populate the planet, they can't go on forever. I think it would be very interesting to continue to look at things that are on a different, not a planet but a moon or other planets that we can reach. It would make sense that we would learn how to terraform things before we can learn how to get to another inhabitable planet. So it would make sense to go that route first. Um, so anything that we can learn about water or life on places like that, that have maybe not necessarily survived but are intact in other places, then I'm sure that'll lead to some kind of breakthrough in that area.
And I guess Elon Musk, he's working on building this 100% reusable spacecraft, and he wants to create a city on Mars, and not just in the far distant future, but 1 million people on Mars by 2050. And I was just wondering what you think about that.
Well, I don't know about the logistics of all of that, but that seems kind of aggressive to me personally. Um, you know, if you had said 2050 20 years ago to me when I was younger, oh yeah, maybe, but 2050 doesn't seem that far away from here, and we've got a lot of advancements to go on down here before we can talk about living in other places. Um, I am definitely interested in that. If we're talking about, I am assuming we're not terraforming, we're going to be like building bubbles or something. So that would be really cool to see something like that. We've seen that in science fiction. If you think about like Total Recall, and things like that, that, you know, that's one of those things that we could possibly do in the future.
Yeah, I know. I think that was scenes from Total Recall are going to be used in Mars safety films about why you need to be careful about making sure your suit's good.
Hmm.
So would you take a trip to space if you could?
Probably. I would be extremely nervous, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, I would do that after I saw 10,000 other people do it.
That's so 10,000 is your number. Like 10,000 people go and come back. You're like,
That's
okay,
just
I'm good.
the, yeah, I need to see a decent success rate. Nine
Yeah,
nine with some decimal places afterward. Yeah.
that totally makes sense. My wife is wanting to see the same thing before I go. But how far would you consider going? Just to orbit to the moon, or if that city on Mars became a thing, would you consider immigrating?
I don't know. Well, I have nothing to compare it to, but it, living somewhere else like that seems very wild to me. Like it's an incomprehensible thing. So I'm not really sure how I'd react to it, but I would definitely be on, up for visiting for a week, treat it like Disneyland and see how it goes and then come back. Because not on top of the risk in the flight, all it takes is one small space rock to hit the bubble that you're in, and it's all over, which is kind of risky for me.
That's true. I I imagine you've seen the movie Dune. Have you seen Dune? Oh,
Yes, I have a long time ago.
I always imagine Mars being like Arrakis, like this really, like water is like so valuable and, uh, you know,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense that water would be a resource that we eventually have to start looking other places for sometime in the future.
so imagine this. It's 200 years in the future. There's this high schooler that's in a history class doing a project on the 2020s. What do you think about this decade would be worth remembering 200 years from now?
From this decade, from like the last 3 years, 2020 to 2022,
Or
or
anything that you could imagine or hope that might happen in the next 7 years too. So don't feel constrained by
oh,
reality.
okay. Okay, I got you. Um, that's a good question. Um, I really have no idea. Nothing's coming to mind.
I know, I think back to the 1820s. I'm just like, I can't imagine anything happening in 1820s. Like, I mean, what was that like? I guess, anyway, yeah. So, well, Chase, I really appreciate your time. Those are pretty much the questions I had, but I see this as a time capsule for future generations to look back on. Is there anything you wanted to talk about or any questions you had for me?
Nothing else I want to talk about. How has this experience been for you? Are we on year 3 or
We are.
4?
We started in December of 2019. So this December will be 3 years. And then counting down to the end of 2024. So 830 more days to go. And I'm running out of family. So
Yeah. You would need a lot of family to cover that ground. But that's over halfway, so that's really cool. What do you personally feel that you've gotten out of this so far? That's been part of the journey, the means
I've,
to
I've,
the end.
yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's given me a chance to talk to a lot of people, get a lot of different perspectives. For example, early on in the project, I interviewed a person that said they didn't think we should go to the moon because we messed up the Earth. We shouldn't mess up the moon too. And that's like a perspective I didn't really, um, think about before. I just can't imagine messing up the moon, because I think of the moon as being like this dead world that anything we do to it would be an improvement. So it was kind of neat to be challenged in that way, I suppose.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
was at Home Depot yesterday, and there's a guy sitting outside of Home Depot, and he was just hanging out, went up and had a conversation to him. And he was like thankful. And it's just been kind of neat. But I think the number one thing is just the sense of starting something and sticking with it. I'm a big starter, but not a big finisher. So like, this is like the biggest time commitment project I've ever made this much progress on consistently.
Nice. I personally have always seen you with that drive, like like no matter what you're doing, that it was the first part of it, like you were just getting started. So optically, it doesn't seem like you have a problem with finishing.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on where you draw the finish line. Yeah. So sometimes when you stop, you're like, there it is, right there. I just finished it.
Yep.
So, but I feel like this I have to take to completion. So it's like the weight of it. Like that first week I could have stopped. What am I doing? But after 1,000 interviews into it with only 800 and some odd to go, it's like, yeah, why not see it through?
Yeah, you can't turn back now.
Yeah, I'm stuck.
Well, we are rooting for you, that's for sure.
I appreciate it. And if you know anybody that'd be willing to have a conversation, keep them close.
Okay.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and stop the recording now.